David Baddiel, are you surprised that Green and Reform candidates who had done anti-Semitic posts got elected in these elections last week?
Well, the key thing is that you've just said posts, which is something which is that you mean that they've said something on social media. And to some extent, I think, like, we live in a world where almost everything that's happening and that we tend to talk about on shows like this is the product of social media. And I know it's kind of an easy thing to say it's social media, but I think that if you imagine a world without social media, quite a lot of these very extreme things, this is very extreme anger and rage and responses to things that have been said, we wouldn't be talking about those things.
And so, yet the social media giants were not invited to Keir Starmer's summit on anti-Semitism, or at least they didn't go.
Yeah, I think that's a big mistake. I didn't know that. You told me that outside. I wasn't invited either. That was also a mistake. But I think that the way we live now, and certainly the resurgence of anti-Semitism, there's lots of reasons for it, but the primary reason is that social media really fosters a kind of conspiratorial mindset, and it also fosters a very straightforward binary idea of identity, whereby I am this and therefore I hate that. That's really how people think on social media. And unfortunately, the way mythologically people think about Jews, or some people think about Jews, allows them to fit into that. This is the thing that I want to define myself against.
So what do you do about that? Because, you know, the government's taken quite a hard line on controlling social media. I mean, do they have to go further?
Well, I don't like control. I am a comedian. I am a writer. I don't like the idea of imposing limits on free speech. I think it's very hard to do it to social media as well, because we are talking about a type of technology that is very new to humanity. We don't really know how to control it, I would say. I think, in general, I would like to think that this is quite optimistic, and I'm not very optimistic, really, about this particular subject. I would like to think that through a process just of sort of rewiring and rethinking and re-education, that you can get people out of these mindsets, particularly out of the mindset whereby people just assume that Jews are responsible for all the world evils. Yeah. But I don't know that you can do it in a top-down way, is my point. I don't know that any amount of government edicts are going to do it.
Right, so the measures in the King's speech, you know...
Tell me about that, I don't even know about that.
Well, what we're expecting is that, you know, groups linked to Iran, the IRGC, will be tackled, harsher sentencing for anti-Semitic offences, a Holocaust memorial bill. I mean, do those measures, will they help, or does more need to be done?
Maybe. I mean, so I think that it should be more of an organic process whereby individuals are brought to a way of rethinking. I mean, that sounded incredibly Stalinist, what I just said there, but I mean genuinely through education and talking and meeting people, that they learn to the other people, and that whichever minority that you decided you hate is in fact just a human being.
But everyone's in silos, aren't they?
Yes, everyone's in silos. But I tell you one thing that you said there, which I think is important, which is, of course, a lot of this stuff is not organic, is not humans. It is, in fact, state-controlled, or it is, in fact, tech bots. It's huge amounts of technology. And I don't even know for what purpose some of the time. Like, some of the toxic noise that is spread by social media and coming from state agents or coming from troll farms all over, wherever, like, what's the end game of that except the dissolution of our society? And I don't even know why people necessarily want that.
Well, there was a rally against anti-Semitism last night. Do you feel that there is a sort of public, you know, an upsurge in public support and sympathy after the Golders Green attack? No?
No. A little bit from some people, obviously. You know, my mother was a refugee from Nazi Germany, and I'm only alive by the skin of our teeth because she got here in 1939. And so I have a sort of romantic notion of the tolerance of the British public, and that the British public are, in fact, a welcoming and embracing of the other nation in general. And
Has that gone, though?
I don't know if it's gone, but what I do think is that that rally is quite a good example of what is bleak about the Jewish situation, which is that there was hardly anyone there. Most people were Jews. There was extreme security there, and what there wasn't was massive allyship like we have seen when other minorities felt vulnerable, felt targeted, had violence perpetrated against them. There's often a big rising up. Many people, especially progressive people...
Like Black Lives Matter.
Well, for example,
demos.
Support those people on the streets, support them in various ways. That doesn't happen with Jews, and less, in fact.
And Keir Starmer wasn't there.
No, Keir Starmer wasn't there, but part of the problem is that there's this weird as well, and social media is responsible for this too, teamification around anti-Semitism politically, so that there's this notion now, which I I think I talked about when I first wrote Jews Don't Count, but it's much worse now, whereby there's an association of fighting anti-Semitism with the right. That's become the preserve of the right, the preserve of the Conservative Party, and even Reform. Is that, and I mean, I think it's fine for the Conservative Party, it's fine for Kemi Badenoch herself, someone who suffered racism, to be on the side of fighting anti-Semitism. I think that's a good thing. But what I do think is weird is that the left, or parts of the left, then start to think, well, that's not for us. We're alienated from that, and that's team rights thing. I think, no, this is fighting a racism, and that's surely something the left are always keen to do.
Do you think the left still has a problem with anti-Semitism then?
Well, some parts of the left do, and partly because of that, partly because they've now decided, oh, it's the preserve of the right. And some of the Jewish community have totally fallen in with that, and that's a problem too. Some of the Jewish community are looking to elements of the right to feel protected, but that's because the Jewish community are alienated and in a kind of wasteland of what is our political home.
You sort of fell out of love with Labour over anti-Semitism. You've been a long-standing Labour supporter in the past. Could you bring yourself to vote Labour at these elections?
I did vote Labour at these elections, partly because, when faced with the ballot, I thought they still seem the best of a not great bunch. Although that's really unfair to particular candidates who I know very little about in my own community.
But the least worst option.
Yeah, this is a whole other discussion, but one of the things I think at the moment, which is obviously today with Keir Starmer and all the rest of it, is I think that, again, sorry to harp on about social media, but we also live in a time where a perfectly adequate, not out the park amazing, and not that charismatic, but kind of adequate man who, in the 70s, would be Jim Callaghan or whatever, and no one would be hating him. They might not be thinking he was great, but no one would think he was the worst thing that ever happened to politics, is considered that, and there are calls for him to go, and everyone's... And I don't know that we can carry on with this, whereby... It's a bit like what's happening in football, whereby a manager has to go and everyone hates them if they haven't had immense success within 5 games or whatever. And culture has got speeded up, is what I'm saying, and also extremed, so that kind of a normal bloke who's OK, who often, or a normal woman who's OK, who often is the person who's going to lead the country, is not good enough anymore.
Do you almost feel sorry for him then?
Yeah, I sort of do feel sorry for him, yeah. I'm sure he doesn't want my pity. That isn't going to be great for Keir Starmer.
Even though he's an Arsenal fan.
Well, he is an Arsenal fan, so he has no pity from that point of view. But I don't... Keir Starmer, from the point of view of, he has tried to combat anti-Semitism. I know a lot of Jews feel the government hasn't done enough and all that. As I say, for me, it's not something you can fix that easily with a lot of draconian, top-down free speech or, this march can't happen restrictions. I don't think that's the way you do it.
But you talked about people, calling for a manager's head or calling for the Prime Minister's head. Do you think we're in a kind of state of perma-crisis now where essentially Britain is becoming ungovernable?
Yeah, I don't think it's just Britain, though. I think Britain seems to be... We live in Britain, so we're more aware of it, but I think... Lots of countries suffer from it because lots of countries are at the behest of social media. The rise of populism is amazing. It's so quick. America is kind of slightly ungovernable, it seems to me. I think Britain used to consider itself like we are a sort of haven of maybe slightly dull stability. Yeah. And we would look at countries like Italy or whatever and think, oh, they're in permanent crisis and constantly having, prime presidents changing or whatever. But now it's not like that here. And I think all these ideas of what Britishness is politically are no longer things that we can expect or as a default.
Well, does that go back to Brexit? And that sort of brings us back to the Prime Minister's speech today where, he talks about putting Britain in the heart of Europe. He can't quite bring himself to rip up his red lines on Europe and, say, right, we should rejoin. I mean, can you bear to think, or would you like to think that in your lifetime, in the next few years even, that, Britain could rejoin the EU?
I don't know. I couldn't bear to think it. I voted for Remain, so obviously I could bear to think it, but I couldn't bear that there could be another campaign, another referendum. That would be a terrible idea.
Do it without a referendum.
Well, that's not going to happen, is it? Because then there'd be some kind of weird civil war in this country, and Cromwell would have to sort that out. I think, I think that Another thing that happens, I mean, it happens with this programme, can I just say, I don't want to be too meta about it, but any answer that I'm giving you now, I'm thinking about how will this be clipped? How will it play on social media? I've seen that you put stuff on social media. It will be taken out of context. It will be used by trolls. Some people will think it's something with that. That's what Keir Starmer is also thinking when he's doing a speech that might involve a reference to rejoining or not rejoining the EU. He's constantly... people are too self-conscious now about how it's going to play to whatever they think their audience is, and that leads to no authenticity.
Well, finally, you know, you've been looking at England and Englishness through the history of England football. You're doing a series on Radio 4. What can football tell us about our current plight?
Well, quite a lot. I've already used an analogy, haven't I, about how managers can't stay for longer than a few games now if they're not successful. One thing I did notice by doing that series, which is trying to find out what Englishness is, which is a difficult subject. It's difficult for English people to own Englishness, I think, because we've got too much imperial power. And so you kind of want to be the underdog who's, like, breaks through, like many, many countries have. But Englishness, it's a bit tricky to own. But one way you can think about it is, if you are from a minority community, you know, if you are from an immigrant community who's come here, as many Jews have, many Jews are football fans, and obviously they like football, but I think they also are chasing a sense of belonging and a sense of wanting to feel English. And that's, to some extent, why I'm a Chelsea fan and an England fan, I think. It makes me feel part of this country.
A badge of belonging.
Yeah, a badge of belonging. I mean, in a very kind of unconscious way, but I feel it very strongly, despite the fact that my mum was German and, in fact, my dad was Welsh.
Well, your series on Radio 4, 60 Years of Hurt, airs this weekend. David, it's been great hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy.